Hello, and welcome to Reflections on Film. In this video, I'll be talking about the 1994 film Pulp Fiction, written and directed by Quentin Tarantino. I love this movie, and a big reason why I love this movie is because of Quentin Tarantino's excellent dialogue
Royale with cheese
and mastery behind the camera. It's also full of incredible performances, and all of these elements make Pulp Fiction the type of film I find myself returning to over and over again. And it seems like every time I rewatch it, I always find something new to appreciate. And on a recent viewing, a particular shot from one scene in the film stood out to me. And what really struck me about the shot is the way it's composed. The scene comes near the end of the film when Jules and Vincent, two criminals working for the crime boss Marcellus Wallace, eat breakfast in a diner after a very long morning on the job. After Vincent excuses himself to the restroom, the thugs pull their guns, and one of them ends up pointed in Jules' face. But Jules takes the upper hand, and what results is a standoff where Jules has to decide whether or not he will kill these two low-level thugs. The specific shot I want to highlight is this one. It comes just after Jules quotes a Bible verse that we've heard multiple times by this point in the film. And now that I've highlighted it and had it on screen for a few moments, you've probably already noticed what stood out to me. Half of the screen is totally blocked out by one of the actors in the foreground. The result is that Jules fills the remaining half of the screen. And in this scene, I think Jules' dialogue sort of doubles for what's going on in his mind. He's talking to himself, struggling with his own conscience. That's why Tarantino blocks out everything else on the screen. He doesn't want us to forget the story going on around Jules. He wants to emphasize that that story isn't what's important. What's important is what Jules is saying and the moral dilemma his character is facing in the moment. So, to really understand why Tarantino has highlighted this shot, we have to listen to Jules' dialogue to get an idea of what's going on in his thoughts.
I've been saying that shit for years. And if you heard it, that meant your ass. I never gave much thought to what it meant. I just thought it was some cold-blooded shit to say to a motherfucker before I popped a cap in his ass. But I saw some shit this morning made me think twice. See, now I'm thinking, maybe it means you're the evil man, and I'm the righteous man. And Mr. 9mm here, he's the shepherd protecting my righteous ass in the valley of darkness. Or it could mean you're the righteous man, and I'm the shepherd. And it's the world that's evil and selfish. Now, I'd like that. But that shit ain't the truth. The truth is, you're the weak, and I'm the tyranny of evil men. But I'm trying, Ringo. I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd.
So the shot composition tells me that Jules is going through an internal struggle at this point in the film, and his monologue enlightens us to what that struggle is, a crisis of conscience. And it also goes on to show the process by which he searches for inspiration as he faces that crisis. He looks for meaning in a verse he's quoted 1,000 times, not because he thought that verse was particularly meaningful, but simply because he thought it sounded cool. But now, in a moment of crisis, he searches that arbitrary assortment of words, hoping to find meaning in them, hoping to find some kind of guidance. And when we take Jules' dialogue into consideration, I can't help but think about how what he's saying relates to the larger ideas at work in Pulp Fiction, why Tarantino has chosen to highlight this shot, and why this scene acts as the ultimate climax for the film. Because for me, Pulp Fiction is a film about meaning and how we derive it from arbitrary places. And in this way, I think it acts as the sort of quintessential example of postmodern filmmaking. And it's all sort of spelled out in this scene, highlighted by the use of this composition, which intentionally focuses the viewer's attention on Jules. In short, postmodernism is an approach to creating art which relies on the use of familiar ideas that are reproduced and reorganized in a way that's meant to draw new meaning from those pre-existing concepts or comment on them in some way. It relies on an artist's understanding of intertextual relationships and audience expectations to accomplish this goal. And throughout Pulp Fiction, Tarantino does a masterful job of executing this approach. Each of the 3 stories in the film are filled with hyper-stylized reproductions of pre-existing archetypes. We have the big bad crime boss, the criminal mastermind, the loyal lieutenants, the crooked accomplice, and low-level thugs. Then Tarantino explores those archetypes in new and unconventional ways. But I think the real strength of the film is how he escalates the tension in all of these stories. He doesn't just give us fun, pulpy stories. At a certain point, he transforms those pulpy stories into meaningful stories about characters facing difficult decisions. And what's great about Jules' story is that we actually get to hear him talk through this thought process as he faces the critical decision of whether or not to kill the thugs that are trying to rob him. We get to see him derive inspiration from meaningless words and ultimately escape the situation with his new worldview intact as a result of that exploration. Now, to me, Pulp Fiction sort of epitomizes postmodern filmmaking because it's a film that at its core is about extracting meaning from arbitrary symbols. What each of these stories we see depicted in the film demonstrate is that any experience with anything that we can objectively conceive in this world can act as a source of meaning, inspiration, or personal growth, even if that is something we've seen depicted a million times before. What's important isn't necessarily what a thing is meant to represent, but the fact that we're able to experience beauty or truth by exploring that thing in new ways. Just like Jules extracts new meaning from words he's spoken 1,000 times in the past just because they sounded cool, so too can we as viewers extract new meaning from Pulp Fiction or any other objectifiable thing every time we experience it. Alright, so I think that's about as pretentious as a person can sound. So that's where I think I'm going to wrap up this discussion of Pulp Fiction. I absolutely love this movie. It's immensely rewatchable, filled with some of the best and most engrossing dialogue I've ever seen, and masterfully shot by one of the most talented storytellers of our time. So yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely suggest checking it out. Once again, this has been Reflections on Film, and as always, thanks for watching.